Close your eyes and imagine waking up tomorrow not in your bed, but on a straw mattress crawling with lice, in a room where 7 strangers are coughing in the darkness. The air is so thick with coal smoke and human waste that your first breath makes you gag. Outside your window, instead of car horns, you hear the death screams of pigs being slaughtered and the clash of chamber pots being emptied onto the heads of passers-by below. Welcome to London, 1350. You've just woken up in the most dangerous city in medieval Europe. Using advanced AI technology, we've reconstructed the medieval metropolis in all its horrifying detail, from illuminated manuscripts, archaeological records, and coroners' rolls that document exactly how thousands of Londoners died. You're about to smell the rotting flesh at the shambles, dodge the human waste raining from windows, and navigate streets where cutthroats wait in shadows darker than anything in your worst nightmare. We'll put you in the shoes of a common laborer trying to survive just 24 hours in a city where life expectancy is 33 years, where 1 in 3 children die before their 5th birthday, and where the simplest cut can mean an agonizing death from infection. The question isn't whether medieval London would shock you. It's whether you'd survive long enough to be shocked. Because here's what the history books don't tell you. In medieval London, death wasn't just common, it was creative. So would you make it through a single day? Let's find out if you're tough enough to survive where most modern humans would be dead by noon. The church bells of St. Paul's Cathedral crash through your skull at 4 a.m. This isn't your alarm clock. This is Matins, the first prayer of the day, and every one of London's 106 churches is joining the cacophony. You don't have a choice about waking up. Medieval London operates on God's schedule, and God wants you awake while it's still pitch black outside. You're lying on a rough straw pallet that hasn't been changed in months. It's infested with fleas, bedbugs, and lice. Your skin is already covered in bites that you've scratched raw. The straw is damp and moldy because the thatched roof above you leaks, and last night's rain has soaked through. You share this palatial 8 by 10 foot room with your wife, your 3 surviving children, and another family of 5. Privacy doesn't exist. When people have sex, everyone pretends to be asleep. You reach for your clothes, which are the same ones you've worn every day for the past 3 months. You own 2 sets, the ones on your back and your Sunday best, which is marginally less filthy. They're made of coarse wool that scratches your skin and never quite dries in London's humidity. They smell like a combination of sweat, smoke, and something deceased. You don't notice anymore. Everyone smells like this. The wealthy douse themselves in rose water and carry pomanders filled with herbs, believing that bad smells cause disease. They're wrong about the mechanism, but right about the correlation. Everything that stinks in medieval London can probably kill you. Your breakfast, if you can call it that, is a piece of black bread and small ale. Yes, ale for breakfast, because the water will literally kill you. The Thames is London's water source, its main sewer, and the dumping ground for the waste of 80,000 people. Upstream, tanners soak animal hides in vats of dog feces and urine. Downstream, butchers throw entrails directly into the current. The water is the color of mud and moves with a sluggish, chunky consistency. Only the desperate or the suicidal drink Thames water straight. Everyone else, including children, starts their day with alcohol. The ale is weak, maybe 2% alcohol, but it's been boiled during brewing, making it safer than anything else you could drink. You step outside into Cheap Ward, the commercial heart of medieval London. The first thing that hits you is the smell. If you've ever driven past a sewage treatment plant on a hot day and thought that was bad, multiply it by 1,000 and add notes of rotting meat, tannery chemicals, and unwashed humanity. The streets are rivers of human and animal waste. There's no sewage system. People empty their chamber pots directly onto the street with a perfunctory cry of Gardaloo, if you're lucky. The more polite householders wait until night. The less polite don't wait at all. The kennel, a groove running down the center of the street, is supposed to carry waste away. Instead, it's a stagnant moat of feces, urine, and the occasional dead cat. You're a laborer, which means you're lucky enough to have work, but unlucky enough that the work might kill you. Today you're helping to build a new merchant's house on Friday Street. Construction in medieval London is barely controlled chaos. There are no safety regulations, no hard hats, no concept that employers have any responsibility for worker safety. You'll spend the day carrying loads of timber up rickety scaffolding made of row-plashed poles. The mortality rate for construction workers is about 15 times what it is today. Falls are common. Being crushed by falling materials is regular. And if you're injured, you don't work. If you don't work, you don't eat. There's no workers' compensation, no disability insurance, no social safety net except the charity of the church, and they're selective about who deserves their help. The construction site is a death trap. The master builder who learned his trade through apprenticeship rather than any formal education is making it up as he goes along. There are no building codes, no inspections, no standards except tradition and guesswork. Houses regularly collapse, sometimes taking entire families with them. In 1365, a house on Friday Street fell and killed 5 people. The coroner's report, which survives, blamed misfortune. Nobody was held responsible. That's just how houses behave sometimes. You work from sunrise to sunset with a break for dinner at noon. Dinner is the main meal of the day, and if you're lucky, your employer provides it. Today's feast is pottage, a gray slurry of whatever grains and vegetables were cheap at market, flavored with a tiny amount of bacon fat. You eat it with your fingers from a common bowl, sharing with the other workers. The guy next to you has a cough that's been getting worse for weeks. He sprays droplets with every bite. You'll probably catch whatever he has, and in a world without antibiotics, that persistent cough could easily become pneumonia, which has a mortality rate of about 30%. The afternoon is when accidents happen. Everyone's tired, the light is fading, and concentration slips. You're carrying a load of timber up to the 3rd floor when the man above you loses his grip. A beam crashes down, missing your head by inches and crushing the foot of the worker behind you. His screams are horrifying. The foot is mangled beyond recognition, bones protruding through torn flesh. The master builder's solution is pragmatic. He sends for the barber surgeon. The barber surgeon arrives with his tools, a saw, a cauterizing iron, and a bottle of strong spirits, not for sterilization, which won't be invented for another 500 years, but for the patient to drink. The amputation takes place right there on the street. No anesthesia except alcohol and a leather strap to bite. The barber surgeon is fast. He has to be because shock kills as efficiently as blood loss. The saw grinding through bone makes a sound you'll never forget. The cauterizing iron fills the air with the smell of burning flesh. The worker survives the amputation, but will likely die from infection within the week. Surgical survival rates are about 20%. As sunset approaches, you need to navigate one of medieval London's most dangerous daily challenges, getting home alive after dark. The city has no street lighting. Once the sun sets, London becomes a labyrinth of absolute darkness broken only by the occasional torch carried by the wealthy servants. By law, you're supposed to carry a light after curfew, but candles are expensive and torches mark you as someone worth robbing. Most people navigate by memory and moonlight, feeling their way along walls slick with moss and things you don't want to identify. Criminals on the night. Cut purses, thieves, and murderers wait in alleys and doorways. The city watch, such as it is, consists of reluctant citizens taking turns at a duty everyone tries to avoid. They're untrained, barely armed, and mostly concerned with surviving until dawn. If you're attacked, nobody's coming to help. Your screams will echo off shuttered windows as citizens huddle inside, pretending not to hear. The murder rate in medieval London is about 50 times higher than modern London. Bodies turn up every morning, stripped of clothes and possessions, waiting for the coroner's examination. But criminals aren't your only concern. The streets themselves are trying to kill you. Without lighting, you can't see the holes, some deep enough to break a leg. You can't see the protruding cellar doors that claim teeth and consciousness. You can't see the signs hanging from buildings at exactly head height for the average person. These signs, marking shops and taverns, are massive wooden or metal affairs, some weighing hundreds of pounds, hanging from rusty chains that occasionally snap. Being brained by a falling sign is common enough that there's legal precedent for who's responsible. Usually nobody. You make it to Pudding Lane where the cookshops are closing for the night. This is where London's poor buy their hot food because most lodgings don't have kitchens. For a penny, you get a bowl of something the proprietor calls stew. It's been simmering for days with new ingredients added as old ones are ladled out. The meat is unidentifiable and possibly cat. The vegetables are on the edge of rot. But it's hot, it's filling, and the boiling H has probably killed most of the bacteria. Probably. Food safety in medieval London is Russian roulette with a spoon. Bakers routinely add sawdust, chalk, and ground bones to bread to increase weight. Butchers sell diseased meat disguised with spices and dyes. Fishmongers paint rotting fish eyes to look fresh. Brewers add psychoactive herbs to ale to make it seem stronger. The assize of bread and ale supposedly regulates quality, but enforcement is sporadic and punishments are theater. A baker caught selling underweight bread might be dragged through the streets with his offending loaves hanging around his neck, but he'll be back in business tomorrow. Water is death, but other beverages aren't much safer. Wine is frequently adulterated with lead to sweeten it, causing a condition called painter's colic, actually lead poisoning, that kills slowly and agonizingly. Milk, when you can get it, comes from cows kept in dark cellars, fed on brewery waste, producing a bluish, watery liquid that's often cut with chalk water and contaminated with tuberculosis. Even ale, the safest option, is sometimes contaminated with ergot, a fungus that causes hallucinations, convulsions, and gangrene. Medieval London's drinking options are poison, different poison, or expensive poison. After dinner, you head to the public latrine. London has exactly 13 public latrines for 80,000 people. The one on London Bridge is considered luxurious because waste drops directly into the Thames below. Others are pits that overflow regularly, flooding basements and contaminating wells. The stench is indescribable. The latrines are also social centers where people gather to gossip while defecating communally. Privacy is a modern invention. You squat next to strangers, sharing a communal sponge on a stick for cleaning. The same sponge that everyone uses, rinsed in a bucket of water that hasn't been changed all day. The latrine is also where you're most likely to be murdered. Criminals know everyone has to go eventually, and the narrow entrances make perfect ambush points. People have been robbed, stabbed, and pushed into the pits to drown in human waste. The coroner's rolls record multiple deaths by misadventure in latrines. One man, attempting to retrieve a dropped purse, fell in and suffocated. Another was murdered and hidden beneath the sewage for a week before anyone noticed the extra body. As you walk home in the darkness, you hear the bells again. This time it's the death knell from St. Bartholomew's. Someone's dying and the bells tell you who. 3 times 3 for a man, 3 times 2 for a woman, 3 for a child. Tonight it's a child, probably from the sweating sickness that's been moving through the parish. The sweating sickness kills in hours. You're healthy at breakfast, feverish by noon, and dead by sunset. Nobody knows what causes it or how to stop it. The rich flee to the countryside when it appears. The poor stay and die. Disease is everywhere in medieval London. Leprosy, tuberculosis, dysentery, typhoid, and countless unidentified fevers sweep through regularly. The Black Death visits every generation, killing 20–30% of the population each time. But it's the small, stupid injuries that kill most people. A cut from a rusty nail leads to tetanus. A bite from a flea leads to plague. A scratch that gets infected leads to sepsis. Without antibiotics, without germ theory, without basic hygiene, your body is constantly under assault from bacteria that modern humans never think about. Medical treatment, when you can afford it, is often worse than the disease. Physicians, educated at universities in classical texts that are centuries out of date, believe illness is caused by imbalanced humors. Their treatments involve bloodletting, purging, and prescriptions that include mercury, lead, and ground-up beetles. They diagnose by examining urine, checking its color against a chart, and sometimes tasting it. Yes, tasting it. The barber surgeons at least do practical work, setting bones and removing arrows, but without anesthesia or antiseptics, their cure rate is abysmal. The wise women and herbalists actually have the best track record, using plants that sometimes contain real medicinal compounds, but they're also the most likely to be accused of witchcraft if a patient dies. You finally reach your lodgings as the watch calls 10 o'clock. Your room is dark. Candles are too expensive for daily use. You feel your way to your pallet, trying not to wake the children. Something runs across your foot. Rats are everywhere, carrying fleas, carrying plague. You lie down in your clothes because it's too cold to undress. Your wife is already asleep, exhausted from a day of washing clothes in lye that burns her hands raw. Your youngest child is coughing, the same cough that killed your two other children last winter. As you close your eyes, you hear the city around you. Cats fighting, dogs barking, someone screaming anger or pain you can. Tell, the death cart rumbling past, collecting the day's bodies, a drunk singing, a baby crying, the eternal sounds of 80,000 people packed into one square mile, living and dying on top of each other. Tomorrow you'll wake at 4 a.m. and do it all again, if you wake up at all. Because in medieval London, every night you go to sleep is a gamble that you'll see morning. But here's the thing about medieval Londoners. They weren't miserable all the time. This was normal. This was life. They found joy in feast days, in miracle plays, in the rough camaraderie of the tavern. They fell in love, raised families, told jokes, and sang songs. They didn't know they were living in squalor because they had no concept of anything better. The past isn't just a foreign country. It's an alien planet where humans somehow thrived in conditions that would break modern people in hours. The average medieval Londoner was tougher than anyone you've ever met. They had to be. Their immune systems were forged in a biological war zone. Their pain tolerance was off the charts. Imagine having a tooth pulled with no anesthesia and considering that routine. Their mental resilience was extraordinary. Losing multiple children was expected, not exceptional. They lived every day with the kind of danger and discomfort that modern humans only experience in extreme situations, and they considered it completely unremarkable. So would you survive a day in medieval London? Physically, probably. The human body is remarkably adaptable, and one day, while challenging, wouldn't kill you unless you were very unlucky. But psychologically, that's different. The constant assault on your senses, the casual brutality, the complete absence of any comfort or safety you take for granted, that would break most modern people before lunch. We live in a world of hand sanitizer and antibiotics, where we consider it a crisis if the Wi-Fi goes down. Medieval Londoners lived in a world where everything was trying to kill them, and they just shrugged and got on with it. The real question isn't whether you could survive medieval London. It's whether you could survive it and remain sane. Because once you've seen a man's foot amputated on the street, once you've used a communal latrine, once you've watched a child die from an infected cut, you understand that civilization is fragile. Every convenience, every safety measure, every medical advance that keeps you alive today was bought with the suffering of countless generations who lived and died in conditions we can barely imagine. Medieval London wasn't just dirty and dangerous. It was the crucible that forged modern urban life. Every public health measure, every building code, every medical advance emerged from the horror of cities like medieval London. The ancestors who survived that daily apocalypse, who raised children in rooms with 7 strangers, who worked construction without safety equipment, who navigated streets full of cutthroats and excrement, They're the reason you're here. You're descended from people tough enough to survive medieval London. Their DNA flows through your veins, carrying the biological and cultural adaptations that let humans thrive in cities. But that toughness came at a price. Medieval Londoners were brutal because their world was brutal. They watched public executions for entertainment. They laughed at the insane chained in Bedlam. They threw stones at criminals in the pillory. Empathy was a luxury they couldn't afford in a world where showing weakness could mean death. The same conditions that made them physically tough made them emotionally callous. You can't watch multiple children die and remain soft. You can't see daily suffering and maintain modern sensibilities about human rights. So when we romanticize the past, when we imagine ourselves as knights or ladies, we're fantasizing about a sanitized version that never existed. The real medieval London was a horror show that makes modern dystopian fiction look optimistic. It was a city where life was, to quote Thomas Hobbes, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. But it was also a city of incredible human resilience, where people found meaning and joy in circumstances that would destroy us. They sang in taverns that stank of vomit. They fell in love in streets flowing with sewage. They raised children in rooms crawling with vermin. And somehow, impossibly, they built the foundations of the modern world. The bells of St. Paul's ring again. It's Compline, the last prayer of the day. In monasteries across London, monks are praying for the souls of the dead and dying, and there are many. Tomorrow, the coroner will record the night's casualties: a tanner who fell into a vat of boiling water, a woman trampled by a runaway horse, a child who choked on a fish bone, a beggar frozen to death in an alley. All preventable deaths by modern standards, all completely routine in medieval London. You've survived one day. Congratulations, you've navigated aided streets that were open sewers, eaten food that was borderline poison, worked construction without safety equipment, and made it home through pitch-black streets full of murderers. You've experienced a tiny fraction of what your ancestors endured every single day of their shortened lives. And if you think one day was hard, remember that medieval Londoners did this for years, decades if they were very lucky, in a world where reaching 40 was an achievement and 50 was almost miraculous. Modern life isn't perfect, but it's paradise compared to medieval London. Every time you turn on a tap and clean water comes out, you're experiencing a miracle that medieval Londoners couldn't imagine. Every time you flush a toilet, take an antibiotic, or walk down a lit street at night, you're benefiting from centuries of advancement built on mountains of medieval corpses. We stand on the shoulders of giants who lived in their own waste and died from infected cuts. The least we can do is remember how far we've come and how much we owe to those who suffered through humanity's urban nightmare. That beautiful medieval London you see in movies, with noble knights and fair ladies, grand castles and charming taverns. It never existed. The real medieval London was a cesspit where children worked 12-hour days, where women died in childbirth more often than not, where men were crippled by industrial accidents, and where everyone was one cut away from death. It was a city that would traumatize modern people within hours and kill them within weeks. But it was also the city that invented trial by jury, that established the rights that became the Magna Carta, that created the commercial practices that became modern capitalism. From that cesspit came Shakespeare. From that brutality came democracy. From that suffering came the relentless human drive to make things better. You wouldn't just survive medieval London. You're already surviving it. Every day in every modern city, you're living in the solutions to medieval problems. The building codes that keep structures from collapsing, the health inspectors who prevent food poisoning, the sewage systems that prevent cholera, the police who deter crime. They're all responses to medieval urban disasters. We've built our civilization on lessons learned from medieval London's failures. Every safety regulation written in blood, every public health measure born from plague, every advance that separates us from our ancestors' suffering. So would you survive a day in medieval London? Wrong question. The right question is, could you appreciate a day in your modern city after experiencing medieval London? Could you ever complain about traffic after navigating streets full of human waste? Could you ever take clean water for granted after drinking medieval ale? Could you ever forget that everything you consider normal, antibiotics, anesthesia, sewage treatment, street lighting, police protection, food safety, workers' rights, is a miracle your ancestors couldn't imagine? Medieval London was humanity at its worst and best simultaneously. It was suffering that forged strength, brutality that created compassion, chaos that demanded order. It was the nightmare we woke up from to build the modern world. And every time you walk down a clean, safe, well-lit street, you're walking on the bones of medieval Londoners who died so you could live like a king they couldn't imagine. That's not just history, that's your inheritance. Own it, appreciate it, and never forget that civilization is 3 meals and one plague away from medieval London. Anyways, I'm Michael, watching the past so we can understand the present. And together, we keep history fueled. I'll see you in the next era.